What's up, everybody, and welcome to Under the Hood with Jonathan Hood. It is tourney time. I cannot wait because there's basketball all day, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We get closer and closer to the Final Four and then the championship, and this is my time of year. So if I'm going to talk college basketball tourney, I'm going to talk to Tyler Aki about this from ESPN Chicago. Don't forget the podcast Pick a Side is on Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Tyler, welcome to the show, man. It's tourney time.
Oh, it feels like old times. Although I will say this, it feels like my invite may have gotten lost in the mail because usually you get me on before the first four, and you're the only person in the entire world that ever asks me for my first four picks.
Well, I thought it would be pretty much chalk, so I thought I would skip that this season, especially with the San Diego State representing so well. I mean, after a banger in game one. And then you thought, oh, game two is going to be competitive. Not the case, Tyler. Nope. Not the case.
I will say Dayton is like a sneaky bucket list thing I want to do just because it seems like an awesome environment of desperation there. You've got the 16 seed fan bases who know they're about to get their asses kicked the next round anyway, but they want to go out there and just have a chance to win a game in the tournament. And then you've got what I call the too cool for school programs, usually like the UNCs. San Diego State's another one. I think we see one tonight with Texas, where they're just like, we shouldn't be here. And then you never know what you're going to get out of them.
I enjoyed that so much, just to see UNC say, oh, the West Virginia governor says we don't belong. Well, we're going to show you that we belong, at least for a night. We belong for a night. We could beat the Aztecs, so we're going to be just fine. Leave your comments as we move forward here. We're going to help you out with your brackets. Before you hit send on your brackets and put your money in, you might want to check out this show right here because Tyler from Pick a Side is here to help us out. Again, leave your comments in, and we'll be brief with our conversation. But before we talk about the bracket, sir, before we get there, I would like to have a discussion with you about what happened at IU. I thought that was just fascinating as Coach DeVries goes from West Virginia to IU. Saw the comments also and watched the press conference while you were working this afternoon. The idea that there was plenty of conversation while DeVries was at West Virginia about the IU job.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have said that out loud, but he talks about how it's a dream job, and he was having conversation while he was coaching the Mountaineers. What was your reaction?
I think it's weird. Not just that, but also Will Wade, the reports of him. I mean, he's got a tourney game to coach in the next couple of days and maybe more, but he's already taken the NC State job. Like, we've seen the sliminess of the portal, and it's just, I mean, it's starting to get exposed too with the coaching. Like you always have known, like, all right, you've got side eye with some of these coaches that are going into the tournament, but for a good amount of it, they basically tell you like, oh yeah, I'm right now I'm coaching McNeese State. Nope.
Right.
Nope. The fact that there's reports out now that Will Wade's taking the job and then that Darren DeVries is taking the job just shortly after being not invited to the NCAA tournament. All of it to me is messy. And I think in the IU case too, that's the best you could do. Really?
I mean,
that's the best you could do.
So Beard didn't want the job? Coach Beard didn't want it, or did they ask?
I'd imagine a lot of asks went out. I feel like for a program like IU, you could have shot a little bit higher here. And maybe I would have just continued to go down the list. And maybe they got all of these different no's, but there's still a bunch of these teams that are in the tournament that I would be asking. Like I would have asked Baylor and Scott Drew. I would have asked some of these type of programs like an Auburn. And listen, they'll probably tell you no, but it's something that the fact that it was hired before the first game of the round of 64 even tipped off to me. I get you got to move fast in recruiting and stuff like that because the portal's open now. Yeah. But I would have tried to find a bigger fish.
I know DeVries from my time being in the Missouri Valley, and plenty of success, especially with his son. But at some point, his son's going to have to go someplace else out of college, Tyler, and he'll be going to overseas or the league or whatever. And what does that look like? Like again, DeVries on that level was a good coach. I think he did a pretty good job with West Virginia, even though he had to coach Toby Okani. former Flame. But I would just say that obviously there's some desperation on the part of IU
Yeah.
to be able to make something happen. And, that's not the splash hire that I thought was going to
Yeah.
happen. But clearly there was a courtship that was happening the entire time. Like, hey, coach, I know you're doing a good job at West Virginia, but, keep us on the radar. And then, boom, it happened. But
Yeah.
the shadiness is on both sides. But it started with coaches first. Before NIL, it was always the coaches that would slip out the back door, having a recruiting session to go take another job. Heard those
Yeah.
stories over the years. It just shows the desperation of IU, I think.
Yeah.
So.
And like another name I forgot to mention there too, Greg McDermott's a name that I really would have gone hard after, because I think he is one of the better coaches that you're going to find. And he's proven it at a high level, and he's made tournament runs. And like, it feels like Creighton's really on the upswing right now. And if you were able to poach him, bring him to the Big Ten, I mean, think about IU. If you could have Signetti and McDermott as your head coaches, that'd be one of the better football basketball combinations in the entire country.
That is true. I think that'd be a really good combination. The other one was the current Drake coach that just came from D2.
Yes.
And I thought, wow, that would be a really big swing. A success in the first year of Drake. If you like your basketball 53 to 45, he'll do that for you because he drains the clock. You'll see that in the NCAA tournament. It was good enough for UIC to beat the Drake Bulldogs with that style, but I thought that was a big swing too. So we'll see what happens. There's still going to be some openings, I'm sure, as we move forward. Will it not?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd imagine you'll see. It's probably going to be a lot of the trickle down effect too, where, all right, this guy's going to leave for this. Like all of a sudden, West Virginia's open now, and like, who does does West Virginia go after? Who you're just talking about there, Ben McCollum, and just continue the Drake to West Virginia pipeline, right? But no, like I think West Virginia is a pretty good job too. Like, I mean, it's gotten to where it's gotten because of what happened with Bob Huggins, but like Bob Huggins was able to win there. And if you're a good enough coach, you can win in West Virginia. I get Morgantown is Nothingville, USA, but you are the main attraction there. Like everything is all about the Mountaineers there.
If you need help with your brackets, we're here to help you right here on Under the Hood with Jonathan Hood. Tyler Aki's with us from Pick a Side, the podcast from ESPN Chicago. I want to ask you, out of everything that you watched from November to now, what was the team that you watched the most in college that you just, even if you weren't looking for it, you just stumbled into the game like, okay, here they are again?
I think it may have been Auburn. I watched a lot of Auburn basketball this year, and obviously they were the number one team for a bulk of the season, stumbled a little bit down the stretch. It's kind of a take your pick out of the SEC, really, for me. A lot of Auburn, a lot of Bama, a lot of Florida, a lot of Kentucky. I just loved watching SEC basketball. You know why, Hoodie? Because it reminded me so much of what the NBA was in the early 2010s, where it was just the style of play where like 3-pointers were starting to become a little more relevant. You still had these like slashing guards that could get to the basket, some scoring guards. And it just reminded me of like those days of when I would watch the Bulls and the Thunder and the Heat and like that era of basketball there. It was always fun, exciting for me. It's one of my favorite iterations of basketball. I just felt like I got that with the SEC. So, I mean, you could really take your pick of any SEC team. I feel like one of them is probably my answer.
It's just the kind of style was aesthetically pleasing, up and down the floor, high scoring, crazy games at the end. I think that's exactly what a shot in the arm that college basketball needed, Tyler, quite frankly.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I mean, the kids out in the portal that want to go to another team, it's really about the style and getting up and down like that. I mean, defense, sure, but offensively speaking, they want to be able to get the ball and they want to go as fast as possible. So you get very few and far in between the teams that just want to just get into a half-court game and just kind of work it like the conference I saw all season with Missouri, where it's not the 2010s, it's 1989. You get the big post guy asking for the ball and a lot of post play, a lot of horns, swing the ball, right, put it through the center to the guard. Like it's, it could become it can become very interesting, especially when you start seeing high scoring games in the Valley or in the Horizon League. But yeah, you're right. The SEC was fantastic. So I will ask you about the committee. Based on how it's laid out, did the committee get it right?
My biggest gripe, I think I have two of the biggest gripes, are with the fact that we have Louisville and Creighton as an 8-9 matchup, and it's
Mm-hmm.
leading off the tournament. Don't get me wrong. Absolute amazing game and matchup. It should
Mm-hmm.
not be an 8-9 matchup. That should be like a second round or like a Sweet 16 type of matchup there.
Mm-hmm.
There's rumors floating that like Louisville and Memphis, their seeds got messed up and they should actually be swapped, and Louisville should be a 5 and Memphis should be an 8. And if you look at like a lot of the analytic rankings and even like AP poll, eye test, whatever you want, like when you look at the last couple of teams that finished 13th in the country, like Louisville did this season, they're all anywhere between 3 and 5 seeds over the last decade. How's Louisville an 8? Right.
Right.
And not just that, but think about, but also think about like what it did to Auburn too. It really hurt Auburn. Auburn now has to play potentially Louisville in a second round matchup.
Right.
And they're going up against them in Lexington, Kentucky, of all places.
Mm-hmm.
And you're the number 1 overall seed, and that's the draw that you got. Like, that doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense to me.
No.
But I mean, personally, I do think that Duke should have been the number 1 overall seed. Like, what more did they have to do? They were 31-3. They dominated down the stretch. They were winning games on their final winning streak by an average margin of over 30 points per game. You won the regular season title. You won the conference title. Not to mention, you have a head-to-head victory over Auburn as well. Like, what more did they have to do to get that number 1 overall seed? Didn't make sense to me.
All right, let's take a look at some of the brackets. Give me the matchup that intrigues you most. You mentioned 8-9 in the South with Louisville and Creighton. I think that's very interesting. As of late, I saw Louisville 2.5 as far as the point spread is concerned, but that's interesting. Anything else that stands out in the South that interests you?
One of the other games that really is intriguing to me is what we've got with BYU and VCU. You're talking about two teams that are complete opposites. BYU is one of these hot shooting teams that has played really well down the stretch to close out their Big 12 season and now enter as one of the just 3-point flamethrowers. But on the other side, you're facing a VCU team that is the number 1 shooting defense in the entire country. I think this Rams team has a chance to really slow this game down. They won the A-10 and pull BYU out of their element. I think that defense in matchups like this in the tournament reigns a little bit more supreme. You're going into these NBA arenas. Your sight lines are a little bit different. Bigger crowds on hand, and just overall nerves too once you get into these tournament settings as well. So I think you stiffen up a little bit, and I think defense helps out a lot in those games, and VCU's got it, and it's one of BYU's Achilles heels.
I think BYU will win the game, but it'll be very close. Not as close as the 2.5 or 3 that I've seen this week, Tyler, but I think that BYU finds a way in a squeaker to win that, and it kind of wakes them up saying that, hey, you're not going to be able to go through the tournament as easy as you went through in the regular season.
I think it could be one of those games that I liken it almost to what we saw in the first 4 with UNC and San Diego State, where, listen, if UNC is going to hit their shots, they were going to run away with that game no matter what. If BYU is going to hit their shots, they're going to run away with this game. But if VCU's defense comes to play, you'll know in the first 5-7 minutes of this game who's going to win. If their defense is causing problems for BYU does not stand a chance.
I want to ask you about Marquette, New Mexico, the 7-10. That'll be at 625. Marquette is anywhere between a 3 and a 3.5 point favorite. That's one of those teams that I saw a lot of when I was looking for it. That's your 11 a.m. FS1. Like, okay, here we go. Here comes Marquette. Here comes a lot of the clapping from Shaka, the rah-rah trying to get the team motivated. I like New Mexico in this game because I think sometimes, and we will see this a lot in every tournament, comes down to coaching. And I think that from a nuts and bolts standpoint, I think New Mexico will find a way to be able to win that ball game. How do you see that?
Well, Richard Pitino can just get the playbook from dad, right? Like we
Right,
saw how
exactly.
St. John's kind of choked out Marquette a couple times this year, but I'm with you. And this is one of those rare games for Marquette where in pretty much every single game they've played this season, they've had the decided lead guard advantage. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think this is the best guard matchup we've got in the first round. You've got on the Marquette side, Cam Jones, a guy who's like all-American level good. New Mexico side, you've got Donovan Dent, who's averaging over 20 points per game, one of the top scorers in the entire country. It's going to be one of the first times where Marquette does not have the guard advantage, and this month is so predicated on what you have in the backcourt. And I just think that this New Mexico team has a little bit more. I know the Mountain West traditionally struggles in this tournament, but this New Mexico team is one that I think can make a little bit of a run, especially against a team like Marquette.
And North Carolina's okay, right? They're gonna make it.
I guess so.
Okay. I think they will too. I take on Ole Miss. That's a 6-11 matchup in the first round. The way that they rolled over San Diego State as if they weren't there. I just think that maybe they got a little momentum going.
Yeah, and listen, usually you see the team that feels like slighted or doesn't belong in the first four make a little bit of a run. Like we've seen it before with, UCLA a couple years ago when they went all the way to the Final Four out of the first four. You see almost every single year a team out of the first four make a run into the second weekend. And I really think that UNC, because of the path that's kind of ahead of them right now, has a good chance to be that team this year. You mentioned Ole Miss. I don't respect the bottom of the ACC or of the SEC as much as I think a lot of the committee gave out in their seedings and stuff like that. Ole Miss was a very perplexing team. I do think they're well coached with Chris Beard, but just the variance in some of their games that you would see. And I feel like, listen, UNC is not going to shoot whatever the hell they shot from three the other night, every single night throughout this tournament. But I think the most impressive part to me, I get they scored over 90 points, but the way that they played defense too was super impressive in that first four game against San Diego State. And if they can continue to play that caliber of defense, they'll win a couple games in this tournament and maybe even get to like Elite Eight level.
We go to the West and want to ask you about UConn and Oklahoma. Seen a lot of Porter Moser in Oklahoma, a lot of tough losses down the stretch. And I see them against UConn. I know UConn, to me, anywhere between 5-6 point favorite. I think UConn will find a way to win that ball game. But I just want to know your thoughts about their longevity. Like, what does that look like in a different UConn team than we saw previous years?
It's a completely different team. I'm a little disappointed because they got a transfer from St. Mary's, Aiden Mahaney, who I thought was going to be the next pesky, annoying UConn guy. And he's just not that. He's kind of been a non-factor for them. I'm pretty disappointed with the output there. I thought we'd be talking about him as like a potential Big East player of the year type of guy. He was far from that this year. He wasn't even close to like best player on the team. But this UConn in terms of longevity, listen, you've got Bobby Hurley and you're always going to, or Dan Hurley rather, and you're always going to have a chance when you've got Dan Hurley. He's probably wants to kick my ass for confusing him with his brother right there. But I think that he needs to get like the next iteration of UConn, because I don't think this one's very long for the tournament, but he needs to get back to getting a really highly skilled big. I don't think he has that right now. I think Samson Johnson is fine, but he's not what he's had in the past with guys like Adama Sanogo or with Donovan Clingan. He's not that. He's not being talked about as one of like the best bigs in the entire sport. If you've got that at UConn, Dan Hurley knows how to win with that type of player. They just don't have it right now.
I know that one of the great traditions of Selection Sunday is to fade everything that Seth Davis says. But because I'm not taking McNeese and High Point as he did on Selection Sunday, because I'm not a moron. But one thing I will do, though, is I will look at a team I've watched. I saw the last 3 games of Grand Canyon. I'm just a big fan of that. First of all, their fan base is just incredible. Tyler, I know that doesn't sound like a bucket list for you as a college basketball guy, but you really should go.
It is.
Because it's just that crowd. I'll always remember when the Flames went in there under Steve McLean, and they're wheeling the woofers to the bass lines. And just like the Diplo, like the strong house music, and just pounding, just the music just reverberating all around the arena. Young and old are up, and they're just like even in their championship game, you saw a little bit of that as well. So that crowd's great, and I just think that I think that Grand Canyon can be able to get past Maryland in a close game. And I also look at Memphis and Colorado State. Colorado State, let's talk about them for a little bit. Why will they be able to beat Memphis in the 5-12 in your opinion?
Well, I think they've got a tremendous just talent across the board with their team. You know, you look at a lot of these analytic metric sites. If you go back to like a month ago, so around like February 15th, Colorado State is the 8th ranked team in the country, not just like in the mid majors, in the entire country, like ahead of teams like Maryland and stuff like that. That's how good they've been over the course of the last month or so. So if you believe in like momentum and stuff like that, they're a team that could carry that out of the Mountain West. Nico Medved's a guy who, if we start to see like the coaching changes, that's a guy, if I'm West Virginia, I'm looking at a Nico Medved right there to try to get him, because he's kind of been waiting out his chance at joining the Power Five. And that could be like the perfect landing spot there. You're not going into the gauntlet of the SEC. The Big 12 isn't what it used to be. That could be like the perfect little landing spot for him to kind of bring that West Virginia program back. I think Nico would be a home run hire if you're West Virginia.
At the bottom of that bracket, as we talk about the West, you know, the committee and led by Bubba, they know exactly what they're doing, man. Because you know why, Tyler? Because if we were part of that committee, we'd want to be able to have that kind of the coaching vortex of Pitino and Self and to be able to have John Calipari to be part of a matchup. So the bottom of that bracket with the 7-10 with Kansas against Arkansas and then St. John's against Omaha. So, okay, how do you see 7-10? Because we've seen a very disappointing Kansas team this year. That's not, when you turn it on, you know what it is, Tyler. You watch it like, they just don't have it this year. No. But then there's Arkansas, and you knew that Calipari was going to get his ass kicked a little bit because new team, he's got to get acclimated to everything else. So the struggle bus 7-10, what does that look like to you?
Well, you're talking about two of the most expensive rosters in the sport right here with what Arkansas now has NIL wise and what we know they poured into at Kansas into that roster there with Bill Self. To me, the boss isn't listening to this, right?
No, he's not. Right. No, Zetterman's not around.
No, but I do like Kansas in the matchup. I just think that Arkansas has been dealing with a lot of injuries. You're not going to have a Duthero. And on top of that, like, who knows what Boogie Flan's status is going to be. I just feel like if there's any team that might be able to like just turn on a switch, it might be Kansas, just because there's so much talent. And not just that, but there's talent with Final Four experience, with national champion experience there. And you've got a lot of guys who are seniors who may just say, you know what, like, this is our last ride. I mean, next stop is Europe for a lot of us. So we might as well leave it all out there. And I feel like this Kansas team, they at least have talent. Like, there are a lot of Hunter Dickinson has got talent. KJ Adams has talent. DeJuan Harris has talent. Zeke Mayo has talent. Like, all of those guys, AJ Storr has a ton of talent. He's probably the most frustrating of the bunch there. You're talking about a guy who's making 7 figures and he's coming in there and he's been kind of a nothing. He's coming off the bench at times. Like, that, you can't have that on your roster. So I think that Kansas gets past that. And if they were playing more of like a flashy 2 seed, I would have been like, all right, they could probably get past that team in the next round. But Patino's no nonsense, man. He's not letting this team get past them.
No, it's a special year. And then, by the way, I never had that on my bingo card coming into the season, like all the praise for Pitino. Because of so many coaches leaving, they looked around and was like, well, you're going to be special. Yeah. Pitino's getting all the flowers, man. I didn't expect that. I thought, good program, solid. Pitino's in there. Maybe, got his beacon trying to find another job at some point, but he's getting all of the like, well, this coach is gone. This coach is gone. This is your platform now. Yeah, that's interesting. So St. John's, Kansas in the next round. That sounds good.
Yeah. I mean, you can't go wrong either way. I think from a basketball standpoint, I would like to see Kansas and St. John's, but from a theater standpoint, give me Cal Patino. And those are two
Yeah.
different matchups. One is coach oriented. The other is what I want to see on the floor. Because like from a basketball standpoint, you're talking about it, for my money, the two best X's and O's coaches in the entire nation. But from like a pure vitriol and drama standpoint, you're talking about two of the absolute masters of it with Cal and with Patino. Like you could not be getting two more different matchups, and I'm here for either one of them.
So we look at the last bracket here to the Midwest, and the bottom, I'll just ask you about Tennessee and Kentucky. That's likely a matchup that we could see. So what about the longevity of Kentucky? Because they'll take on Troy in the 3-14 matchup. Tennessee against Wofford at the bottom. Could that be a collision course?
Yeah, definitely. I think that Kentucky's dealing with some injuries right now. But I do think that overall they've got the body of work to knock out a team like Troy. I think they should handle them in the first round. And I think there's just too much veteran experience. Usually you don't see that with Kentucky teams. You're usually dealing with a lot of freshmen, sophomores, and like the one junior who can't close the yearbook yet. But with this Kentucky team, it is like seniors across the board at this point. And even with some of the injuries, I think they're good enough to get past Troy. They're good enough to get past whatever combination of Illinois, Texas, or Xavier that they face. And then Tennessee, I think, is where you just run into issues. I just think that's where you've already faced them a couple of times. And even though you beat them once this year, like Tennessee is one of those teams that just you get it. Now, officiating does matter with a team like Tennessee because they're one of those teams that's going to play super physical. And if you get the wrong officiating crew, you could be fouling some of those guys out or at least giving some trouble there. However, the way that Kentucky kind of rolls, very shooting predicated. They're not going to do a lot inside. So it's a little bit tougher to, when you're a perimeter oriented team, to get the benefit of the doubt on some of those foul calls. You're not going to get a lot of that when you're just hanging around the 3-point line, which I think could give Kentucky some problems. I would like Tennessee in that matchup there. I just think Kentucky's a little too banged up and maybe not the perfect matchup for them, especially in a neutral site type of game.
You know, I love Tennessee Tears, but I have to give Rick Barnes credit. I mean, it's really good. It's been a really good basketball team this season. I've enjoyed them a lot. So I want to ask you about Houston because I'm going to give you my final four. I know yours is already taped on the fridge early, but I have Houston going far. But here's the question. When you look at what they have to go through, what's a stumbling block for Houston, do you believe, based on their personnel and based on the matchups that they could face?
Well, Gonzaga's no cakewalk. Game 2. Mark Few just gets to second weekends. It's kind of in his DNA. He's done it 9 years in a row now. And it hasn't really mattered he's been there as an 11 before too. Like it doesn't matter. But so I think Gonzaga, that's a team that's top 10 in a lot of metrics too across the board, even though the eye test would tell you far from that. But I think Gonzaga is not going to be easy. Clemson could give them some issues too. However, I do think that this Houston team is just kind of perfectly built this year. They remind me a lot of what Virginia was in 2019, where all the pieces finally came together that year and they won the national title. Houston, to me, for so many years has been a team that's just been all defense, defense, defense. And we're going to choke you out and get there based off of we're going to suffocate you. But this year they've got a top 10 3-point offense, one of the 10 best 3-point shooting teams in the country. And that was the difference with Virginia. They were a good to solid 3-point shooting team for the bulk of those Tony Bennett years. But 2019, you just had guys that were hitting at 40% plus, like across the roster. And that's kind of where Houston is right now. Houston right now is one of the best 3-point shooting teams. And when you compare that with the defense and also the pace at which you play, a slower pace, good 3-point shooting team, good defense, slow pace, I think that's a really good place to live. It's something that UConn's kind of gone by the last couple of years, where they've just been a really good shooting team. They're a slower pace team, and they're a tremendous defense.
As we have our conversation, go to Pick a Side, find it on Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. That's where you can find Tyler and Shane Norling with their show. So I will give you my final four, and please pick it apart.
All right.
So I have Texas A&M, Florida, Bama, and Houston.
I like it. Listen, Texas A&M is one of those.
But Houston wins though, because I
Houston wins
think
it all.
because if it's not Kelvin's time now, then I don't know when it's going to be.
Yeah. I mean, you're probably right on that. Like it's so tough to win it all in the like this is the toughest trophy in all of sports, in my opinion. Like you're talking about a 68 team crapshoot one and done elimination tournament. It's the toughest title in all of sports. But your Texas A&M pick is very interesting to me because I think A&M is a team that I've been super high on all year. And even though you look at a lot of their offensive numbers and it's really ugly, like not pretty, it is ugly, like straight up terrible, like some of the worst numbers in the country. But I do think they've got two X factors on their team. First of all, they're the best offensive rebounding team in the entire country. So whenever you're getting extra opportunities in March, you can capitalize on that. You also have a very veteran-laden backcourt with Wade Taylor, Zurich Phelps, and not just that, but those two are two of the clutchest guards in college basketball. That's something that you're not going to find in any sort of metric. The amount of big shots that Wade Taylor has hit for this team, I think you're just only going to see it amplify in March. I really like Texas A&M. The problem is that if there's a game where they're just not scoring, you could be in trouble there. But they are the master of this statistic that has been crafted by Evan Miyakawa called the kill shot, which is predicated on 10-0 runs. How many times do you get 10-0 runs? How many times do you prevent 10-0 runs from happening on you? Texas A&M is elite in both of those. And I think when you've got that ability offensively to just kind of flip a switch, like there were so many Texas A&M games I watched this year, sluggish out of the gate, that you're down 34-29 at half, and then they end up winning the game by 15. Like that's just the type of team. They may struggle a little bit in the first half, but they'll hold you to 20, 25 points in the second half. And if they do that, they're going to give themselves a chance to win.
So what's on the fridge? Would you lock in?
So my final four, I've got Michigan State, Alabama, Houston, and Florida. And then I'm rolling with a Florida-Houston national championship, and I got Florida as my champion.
Oh, we're just the opposite. Okay, so I like Houston. You like Florida.
Yeah. And listen, in almost any other year, I'd be picking Houston. Like you look at the KenPom numbers for the one seeds this year. They're four of, I believe, the top 6 teams ever. Maybe it's 8. Four, let's say conservatively 8. 4 of the top 8 teams ever in the KenPom era. That's how good the one seeds are. Like it is very, very top heavy season of college basketball.
I just there's other things and other factors, Tyler, that we look at with these first round matchups, and that's the portal, where there's going to be maybe a few more upsets, not many, but a few more upsets. Like I told you, I like Colorado State and I like Grand Canyon, but we get to the point now in our conversation that some of these matchups, they're not upsets. If you have guys that can shoot that you brought in for a year, these mercenaries that come in from the portal and they just get it done, and like they just get it done. Like we're going to start in our sports lexicon, our college basketball lexicon, start talking about just teams, just who they are versus the brand loyalty.
Yeah,
that's what's going to come down to.
I mean, coaches are going to be more important than ever, and who you have as your coach, and how they can recruit. And how they can get guys out of the portal. Like you heard Rick Pitino, how he's talked about his thoughts on high school recruiting. There's going to be years where he doesn't do it. This is one of them. He's not going to go out and get a high school kid. He doesn't need to get a high school kid because you're not replacing a senior guard with a freshman. I don't care if he's a 5-star, 3-star, it doesn't matter. The only way to replace a guy like that is through the portal these days. Find a guy who is averaging 16, 17 points. He can be from a mid-major, maybe even a guy with 2 years of eligibility left. You look at the top guys in terms of the player of the year race, and I'm talking like the full like top 10 of the player of the year. Not, it's a 2-horse race now, but like 6 of the top 10 guys in the player of the year race this year are all guys who have transferred up from mid-majors. And it goes to show what the development curve is like in the college game right now, and just how important the transfer portal is. And you can say like, mid-majors are just the feeder programs now for these high major teams, but that's not necessarily the case. Like I get Florida Atlantic was decimated, but that's because they lost their coach. Like you look at like Arkansas's got one of their guys. Florida's got one of their guys. Michigan's got a handful of their guys. And that's going to naturally happen when a coach leaves. But like, if you can just kind of bring the band with you, you're going to be in a pretty good spot and just continue to develop those guys. And coaching is more important than ever in this sport right now, more than ever.
It certainly is, because it's multifaceted. It is coaching, but also it is salesmanship. It always has been as far as recruiting, but on the NIL side of things, brother.
I have a question for you. Like, the GM aspect of this sport now, I think is so fascinating. Like, student managers are more important now than ever, because you're just being groomed to be a future general manager of a college basketball program.
Right. Well, now there's an extra job for you. Okay, you don't play. You may not coach. If you coach, you're probably the fourth guy on the bench asking how many timeouts it is to the scorer's table. And you may not ever get that one shot. But as a GM, okay, well, I'll go to school for that. You know, I'll get the business administration, and I could be able to be that for you and help a college program that way. That's an extra job that wasn't there before.
Yeah. Or a collegiate agent too. I mean, there's thousands of kids. Like, I did a spit take yesterday when I saw this notification coming from Jeff Goodman. Some guy from Virginia was entering the portal, and it was like his agent, Adrian Autry Jr., told the Field of 68, "You mean the son of the head coach of the program that I root for is an agent, and you can't have him go out and funnel guys into your program?" Like, what? Like, I was taking classes with that guy in college. And the fact that he's now handling like these thousands of dollar deals and facilitating, I was like, mind blown for me.
Oh my God. That's incredible. But this is going to be something that's going to be needed. Yep. Coach is not going to be able to sit there and just do the calculation of like, how much is this worth and how much, like, that's enough stress itself. Someone has to take that stress off of it.
Well, that's part of what Patino says too. Like, I don't do the dollars and cents. I let them take care of that. I don't care about the dollars and cents. I just want the player to come in, and I want to coach the player. And I respect that. It's what the job should be for these coaches. Let the GMs handle the nonsense of NIL.
The priests are taking care of the dollars and cents at St. John's.
In body armor.
That's it. In body armor. That's true. So pick a side. When's the next podcast for you and Shay? You guys broke it down a couple of days ago as far as who you like in the tournament. So what's next?
Yeah, so we'll get you all of our picks for the second round after the first round concludes, and then we'll be with you every step along the way of the tournament. So we'll get you Sweet 16, Elite 8. Basically, once the round ends, we'll have more picks for you.
Just so you know, your partner, if Izzo's out early, he's going to want to fire him into the sun. I'm going to fire him into the sun.
He's going to hit the roof. He's going to hit the roof. You know, the funniest part, too, is he's already made plans for all of us at a Michigan State bar for Sunday. And it'll be a very lonely reservation if they get bounced by a 15. I feel like his punishment should be he still has to go to the bar if they lose to the 15.
It'll just be him and his dog.
It'll be like the SpongeBob meme of him sitting alone in the restaurant in the booth.
Sad. Still cussing Izzo to the clouds. I can see that. Because that's who he is, passionate about his Spartans.
Yep.
Tyler, I really appreciate our yearly conversation and trying to get everyone ready for the tournament. And as always, it's going to be fun. And please, folks, one more tip for you. Before Thursday, please find out where True TV is. Don't tweet us asking where True TV is. Just find it. It's one of the channels. Find True TV. Look for the guys that do all the jokes. Was that the
Impractical Jokers?
Yes, find that because that's their channel now.
Yeah.
Yes, get there. Find Murr and find those guys and watch Impractical Jokers right into the tournament. That's how you do that.
One of the Sal was performing like at a theater around the corner from me a couple months ago, and I was just like, oh, he's like building his content up, getting ready for March Madness.
Oh, you didn't go? You didn't go? You didn't support Sal? No. Come on now, support Sal.
I support him enough, but I watch his network enough in March, so that's how I support.
Isn't that the funniest thing?
When that 11 o'clock game is still rolling and I fall asleep after it's a blowout and I wake up and it's like it used to be George Lopez. You wake up, you hear bum, 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 and it's like, oh, geez, it's 2 a.m. That's what I get now with Impractical Jokers.
You got them laughing behind a counter someplace. That's what it is. So please find True TV. Don't complain about where True TV is. Get it fired up now so that way you can go through and watch all your great college basketball for the tournament. Tyler, as always, we appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Anytime, Hoodie.
Enjoy the brackets, everybody. There they are. Hope that you get a winner. It's Tyler and I. Houston against Florida. Let's see who wins. So long, everybody.